We're going to be talking about planning and implementing school-age programs. Similar to preschool and infant and toddler, I wanted to talk real fast about the population that we serve. So there's about 28 million school-age children in the United States who have a single parent who works or who have both parents working. And of that 28 million, a little under half go home alone. So that's 15 million who have no before or after school care or supervision. So there's lots of different types of programs, and I know I've harped on this a bit with the diversity of our programs, but then within school age, the locations and environments of the different kinds of programs vary widely as well. For example, in public schools, you can have state-funded programs within the public schools. There's child care centers like Discovery Isle, Children's Paradise, and Bright Horizons, I believe, also have before and after school components. Then there's programs that are independently run like the Boys and Girls Club or the YMCA, and then there's faith-based programs with youth components. FCC homes as well provide for some before and after care. And the military also has school-age programs and youth programs. I've been typically talking about developmentally appropriate care, but I thought I needed to touch a bit on school age or middle childhood development. And we've talked a very little amount about development for a child development class, but this is an advanced administration and management course, and you should probably know the basics of development. You've taken 115, 105, so these things should be known to you, but I did want to touch on school age because in my experience that has been an age group that families and care providers know less about. And middle childhood is just as important as any other period, and it's really a part of their childhood when they develop a sense of who they are, what they can do, and how they perceive others around them. And they're really kind of developing a sense of themselves, and they're strongly attracted to the acceptance of their peers. So they're moving away from their families and their family units and are more concerned about peer acceptance. This age group is also entering Piaget's concrete operational and also Erikson's industry versus inferiority, and that's ages 6 to 12, 7 to 12. And this is a great age group to work with because they have a lot more cognitive processing skills, they use logic more, they use problem-solving skills, but their emotional processes are still developing. So they're still going to need lots of quality, positive supervision, and we also need to set up social encounters so that they can use and we can foster appropriate social and emotional development. YMCA in Ontario, they have a fantastic video, and I like that it talks about the ages and stages of middle childhood. I also want to point out that ccld.org, so Community Care Licensing Division, has a whole section of their website called child care videos, and that's going to take you through all the steps of licensing, supervision, ratios, how to make a complaint, what happens if a parent makes a complaint against you. So I would have liked to have cited and sourced our licensing videos more, but for whatever reason, probably because it's a state of California thing, I can't link to those within my PowerPoint. So you're going to have to go to the website and watch them. It's totally up to you guys, but if you are running a program that is licensed, which you should all, if you're taking this class, you have a specific goal in mind, most likely, which is to run a licensed center or FCC home. Those videos are really going to help you, and they are kind of trying to demystify the licensing process. So I wanted to talk a little bit about social and emotional development because part of our online assignment is going to play into the fact, and you are going to cite your own beliefs on how children in middle childhood grow socially and emotionally. So like I said, this is kind of a period of leaving your family unit and wanting to engage more in peer groupings and developing strong bonds with a few friends. And it's very typical to want to form clubs and cliques. You're more peer focused at this age. So really what we're wanting to do is provide balanced adult supervision. So we're giving children space to cooperate, negotiate, resolve problems, but we also need to supervise to make sure that we are discouraging bullying and we're focused on positive development life skills like cooperating. And we want them to form social groups, and we need to set that up within our lesson planning. Soccer, art, gardening, woodworking, natural interests of this age group should be fostered, and they should be allowed to group by peers. You're going to need to make sure if you're running a school age program that you're training your staff, because their knowledge of typical social development and how children grow and allowing them to grow is going to be imperative. Partially because you want them to provide that developmentally appropriate care, partially because this age group is sometimes not as focused on within our child development courses. We're primarily 0 to 5, and we've always kind of said that. But middle childhood is deeply important to our school age programs. And then also, the better trained your staff is, the better trained they will be and able to handle challenging behaviors that might come up within the social and emotional period or development period, and then also how they're going to communicate that to staff. And before we go on, I did want to talk about bullying. So bullying is unprovoked aggression intended to inflict injury or discomfort on the victim, and it can either be direct or indirect. And I'm making generalizations right now, but more often than not, boys will engage in more direct bullying, hitting, and it'll be aggressive physically, while generally girls might be more indirect. They might socially isolate other children or gossip about others. So this, and I saw an example of this. I needed to get some work done, and I was at Starbucks, and I didn't realize that the school next door was going to get out while I was there trying to get some work done. And all of a sudden I was surrounded by like 50 middle schoolers, and I was actually working on something about social and emotional development, and it was interesting for me to kind of see it play out where boys were pushing and shoving, girls were clicking off into groups, and there was absolutely no supervision. So there were a couple instances of hitting, and there was some gossiping and some social isolating. So it's interesting to see within this group of a lot of children how their social and emotional development was taking place nicely, and they were negotiating, they were queuing or lining up really nicely, and then towards the end, as this group of 50 got kind of unwieldy, some bullying was happening, because I would like to say because there wasn't any positive social interactions being encouraged, and there was less supervision, no supervision. Then I also wanted to touch on the idea of older school age. They might engage in cyberbullying over kind of our electronic devices, and your program is going to have to kind of decide that on your own. Some older youth programs I've heard of allow and have children have their cell phones and their devices on them, whereas the younger kind of school age wouldn't. So depending on if this is an issue in your program, it might be something that you might have to deal with. So scheduling staff is really going to depend on the needs of your program. And split shifts are really nice because they do provide continuity for the children. They're there in the morning, they're there in the afternoon, but it can be difficult to find teachers or experienced teachers who can accommodate or who enjoy this schedule. And then as far as other staffing schedules that you could try with school age is having a morning teacher who provides before school care and then can work as a float or a sub or a breaker when those school age children are in elementary school. And typically if they work like a 6 to 3, they can help out in the afternoon with some of the kids, and they're obviously there during school breaks. Then the education and the experience of the staff that you might want be different. as well. Some programs really like teachers with like a PE or recreation background, and then some programs look for teachers who have worked with or can work with a variety of ages, because we often are multi-age programs. So part of our online assignment, it's a 3-parter this week, is coming up with a work schedule. So I've put an example of an afternoon program. When you do this for your online assignment, you're going to do an AM and PM work schedule. And this is going to include teachers and staff that are available. So for example, I have 3 teaching staff, fully qualified staff, arrive at 2. And the 1 site supervisor is already at the school, and they are going to set up class. At 2:45, they're going to walk about a quarter mile to the center. At 3, school is dismissed. There's a roll call with 36 students present, but you can have 42 enrolled in your program. You walk back to the center with the students. At 4 o'clock, you have a 10-minute break, and the supervisor breaks staff one by one, and that takes 40 minutes total. From 4 to 5:45, the staff is supervising students. At 5:45, dismissal of students, and staff begins cleaning, and at 6, the shift ends. So what you're going to do is you're going to say when the shifts start and when the shifts end, how many children are going to be in your enrolled in your program, how many staff you would have, and when breaks would be conducted. A lot of working with all children, but especially in middle childhood, is kind of this idea of balance. So we're balancing the supervision of our children, and then we're also balancing the schedule so that we can accommodate the needs of both the children and families. Because in after-school programs, there's usually like a competing need. Parents want a safe, healthy environment, and they really typically want their children to do their homework. And then children want recreational games, they want time to play with their friends, they want free choice, less structured activities, and no homework. So we have kind of 2 desires of children and families, and how do we kind of come to a negotiated middle ground between both of those desires? And then for some of us as well, we're going to also have the requirement of the funding body. If we're state funded or if we've been contracted or given grants, that also might tell us what we need to do with our programs. Some programs are more academic, some programs are more gross motor oriented, and it really depends on what requirements you have. So we have all of these requirements and we have all these desires. So how do we have a daily routine and a schedule? And the great thing about middle childhood is that typically the routines are going to be much less than our infants, toddlers, and preschoolers. Feeding and toileting still need to happen, but it typically happens without as much supervision. Children at this age have been potty trained for a very long time. Typically, they know how to wash their hands. So while you're supervising all these, it's not as routine based and it's not as much of your day. So you can have more of a schedule. And typically the best thing is a mix of free play time, gross motor time, because they are just getting out of, a 6-hour shift at school, clubs and special interests, and then homework depending on the program and depending on what your contract stipulates. So even though a program might be focused on homework or tutoring or academic success, because a lot of great programs are based on that and that's their contract, there also will be built into their day time for free play and gross motor exploration, and then typically go back into academic success or tutoring. America Reads, that's a program that I actually started my journey with children with back in the 90s. I was a college student and I went to an after-school program when I lived in New York. So this was in a project in Brooklyn, and we were contracted to, and my job was to do literacy tutoring with at-risk students. And that's how I kind of discovered my love of education. So back to the routine schedules though. During school breaks, obviously you're going to be there all day long, so you're going to have kind of an alternative holiday schedule, and it should be written in advance and posted for the teachers and children and parents. So because you're going to be providing more play time, most gross motor time, more structured activities and clubs. So I just wrote an example of what I would have for an afternoon school age program. So 3 o'clock is school dismissal, 3:15 they arrive at the center, roll call, hands washed, half an hour of snack time, 4 to 5 choices between clubs, gross motor outside and structured activity, 5 to 5:45 homework and tutoring, and then at 5:45 it's cleanup and dismissal. And this also segues into the staff schedule that I had 2 slides previously. So this is what the children are doing while the staff is supervising and the site supervisor is supervising everybody. So families will need less daily detail-oriented information because the children are more independent, but there still needs to be daily communication from the teachers. They still need to know how their day went, strengths of the day, issues if they arise, and unfortunately sometimes we have to be kind of the liaison between the school and the family. It's not ideal, but sometimes teachers will pass on things, notes, homeworks that we need to then pass on to the family. Parent participation, I've also noticed, could be less. I think that's unfortunate, but as our families age, sports happen, life happens, so sometimes we get less of our parents in our center. I do think this means we need to communicate more about our events much more ahead of time, like months in advance, so that we make sure it doesn't interfere with baseball games, public school events, things like that. A couple of years ago, I had a back-to-school night for my center, and I unfortunately inadvertently scheduled it the day after a back-to-school night for the public school, and so I had like nobody from the school age program show up because it was way too much in 1 week. So knowing what the public school is doing so that you can plan around it and you can let our families know much in advance, I've noticed that kind of helps. But I would love to hear from the people that are working with school age now about how they encourage parent participation in your program. Newsletters are always really helpful as well, and this can always be a club activity. Especially children that are into writing and poetry and drawing pictures and stuff like that. They can make their own newsletter on the back of your newsletter, and your newsletter would then say events that are happening, maybe some parent education, and just notes and things that you need the parents to know about a month in advance. I think our school age is a fun age group to lesson plan and space plan for, because they are getting so much more sophisticated motor planning skills. So you can do like gardening and woodworking and oil painting and watercolor and all these types of things that you typically might not do with a 2- and 3-year-old. So I do really love that about this age group. I do like to mention solitary versus social, or independent versus social games and structured activities. For our little introverts who have maybe been in a school environment for 5 or 6 hours, that can be a really long day. And so having built into your program choices like a reading nook, or playing solitaire by yourself, or painting by yourself at the easel, those are really nice for our children that kind of need some alone time before they can engage back into the program. And then for our little extroverts who are people persons, playing cards and dominoes, foosball and pool, and then our clubs and stuff like that, that's going to be really nice to have that mix of like independent and social built into our programs. Some challenges that occur are sometimes we have to use a space that is completely not ours, like a cafeteria. And then some programs don't even have a dedicated space within their own program. They might use a multi-purpose room after school, or they might share spaces with other age groups. I've heard all different kinds of ways to schedule. I had a program that we used the cafeteria only in the morning for our before and after school program, and so we only had 2 shelves to ourselves, and so we had to be really creative and flexible in how we moved the shelves. Small activities that we were able to bring in because space was really a premium, and how are we going to kind of meet these needs in this 2 hours we had before the school started, so we could provide structured and unstructured activities in a small area with limited materials. So that's one of the challenges of these programs. In my previous PowerPoints, I talked a lot about ratios and there was a lot of writing, and it will be the same with FCC homes as well. There's a lot of ratio considerations. So doing school age was kind of nice because I could actually put a picture up. So for children who are enrolled in kindergarten and above, it's a 1 to 14 ratio, so 1 adult or 1 fully qualified teacher to 14 children. Or 1 to 28, 1 fully qualified teacher and an aide to 28 children. So that's very easy. Not easy to always implement, but easy to remember what our ratios are. Some additional supervision concerns are vehicle transportation and then walking to school, and I kind of consider these the same because it is transportation. And I'm going to talk more about this in my FCC PowerPoint about the requirements that you need to have in order to transport children by vehicle, and then similarly is walking them to school or being on field trips. Bathroom supervision as well can be an issue in some programs because theoretically they need less supervision. We're not wiping their butts, they know how to wash their hands, but we still need to be aware of where children are and they are being supervised. Some children are going to need more supervision in the bathrooms. They have challenging behaviors, they like to push boundaries, or they have special needs. So some children will need more bathroom supervision than others, and we always need to be aware of where our children are and supervising them. Getting back to the idea of field trips though, your ratios don't get any lower with field trips, but they can get higher. For a water aspect, correct me if I'm wrong because I've never done a water aspect, but my understanding was for school age, for water aspect field trips like pools, beaches, or water parks, it's a 1 to 6 ratio. For infants and toddlers, it's 1 to 1, and for preschool, it's 1 to 4. That was my understanding of what that was. There are a lot of practical concerns with that. My daughters did a Parks and Rec and then a YMCA summer camp, and they wore these like super bright highlighter green huge t-shirts that said the name of their program on them whenever they went on a field trip, and then on the back it had like a color to indicate which group they were in, like which counselor was theirs, because they were out in the community a lot, and so they needed to kind of be able to keep their group of highlighter kids all together and be able to do roll call really easily as well. And then summer and school breaks as well. This is a planning concern as much as it is a supervision concern. Surveying your parents well enough in advance to know what their needs are for the summer and spring and winter breaks, which can be 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Are they going to be around? Are they not going to be around? Are you going to need to hire more staff, or are you going to have to break up staff schedules? Also knowing that your staff might want to take breaks at this time as well. So you need to keep your ratio, but you might need to increase staff in order to meet the needs during summer and school breaks. So once again, I'm going to talk a little bit about balance. It should probably be the subtitle for this PowerPoint. But we've talked about the balance between the needs of our children and our families and what they want out of our programs, but then kind of balance supervision within emotional terms. So children need space and time to explore their social and emotional development. So we don't need to get involved or pick team leaders really anymore. You know, if they're at the foosball table, part of growing up and learning important social and emotional life skills is negotiating, cooperating, and then getting, if you have disagreements, working through them. So if children were playing at the foosball table, you would set up programs so that they could engage in that, but then there would also be enough supervision, so if children were being excluded or bullied when it was time to be the leader of the foosball team or whatever like that, you would get involved and you could help them get back into that negotiating and that cooperating and those positive aspects of our social and emotional development. Our weekly assignment is going to be to write a discipline and bullying policy for staff. So this policy is going to articulate children's social and emotional development within middle childhood. It's going to explain the policy for children who display challenging behaviors and how staff in the program are going to approach these behaviors. And it's also going to talk about our policy for when children exclude others or are being excluded. So that's going to be part of your weekly assignment, is to write a paragraph or two. It doesn't need to be really long, but it does need to kind of talk about three different things: how children are learning socially and emotionally, how we handle challenging behaviors related to social and emotional development, and then also what happens when bullying occurs. So this is going to be written for staff, but ideally once you've kind of reflected on it, written it, and I've possibly edited it, it would be easily adaptable to be included as a social and emotional policy for parents. So it can be part of the handbook for families to communicate what your program, how your program handles social and emotional and discipline policy within your program. So safety is an unusual concern for this age group because, like I've said before, some of the challenges is that your physical site might not be yours or might not be yours all day. So it's really important that these programs are flexible and have movable environments, but then are also conducting safety checklists every day to make sure that the physical site remains safe for children. Like I shared earlier, I had a program where we were in a school's cafeteria for 2.5 hours in the morning, and so we needed to supervise the children, but before they came we needed to clean and we needed to sanitize to our child care standards, and we also needed to make a sweep of the cafeteria and make sure that there were no hazards present because that wasn't something that we could control. All programs in all age groups should have a safety checklist that caregivers and teaching staff are doing daily, and then other parts of your program like your maintenance staff and your janitors might do it monthly, and then your cooking staff might do it weekly. It really depends on how you would like to structure your program, but safety checklists are a great idea, and they're a way to make sure that the safety hazards are seen and remedied. This would also be a place where if something did come up, staff could note it in order to let management know about it. It's kind of like when you go to a grocery store bathroom and there's that checklist on the wall that like a staff member has been through, or at Starbucks has come through and they've cleaned the bathroom. So it just kind of holds everybody accountable. But in this case, it's not like, is there toilet paper? It's, are there outlet covers? Or if you have on your door, if you have alarms, are the alarms working? That type of stuff. It's really just ensuring that the safety continues to be a concern and it's taken care of daily. So in conclusion, we support working families by keeping children safe, keeping them supervised, and I like to kind of consider enhanced. So we provide programs before, after, and during school breaks that provide supervision and provide structured and unstructured programs that support the development of middle childhood.